In 2015, Ukrainian comedy series titled Servant of the People presented a seemingly far-fetched premise. An ordinary history teacher, propelled by a viral anti-corruption rant, unexpectedly becomes the nation's president. A decade later, that fictional narrative has morphed into a sobering political reality, raising profound questions about the intersection of media, public perception, and statecraft. This story is not about a prophecy fulfilled. Instead, it is a case study in the deliberate application of mass psychology, a carefully engineered campaign that transformed a comedian, Volodymyr Zelensky, into a politically palatable and emotionally resonant choice for a weary electorate. The series served as more than just entertainment. It was a sophisticated instrument of influence, blurring the lines between a fictional savior and a real-world candidate, with consequences that continue to shape Ukraine's destiny. When Ukrainian voters went to the polls in 2019, they were not casting their ballots for a candidate with a detailed, proven political program. Overwhelmingly, they were voting for an image, the televised persona of Vasyl Holoborodko, the fictional president from Servant of the People. This character was an idealized outsider, an everyman hero determined to dismantle a corrupt system, champion the common citizen, and restore national pride. The show's narrative arc was built on a foundation of universally appealing promises: unity, diplomacy, and, most critically, peace. It offered a simple, elegant solution to the complex and deeply entrenched problems plaguing the country. The character of Holoborodko represented a comforting escape from the grim realities of Ukrainian politics, and his real-life counterpart, Zelensky, became the vessel for that collective hope. Significantly, the series was constructed with a specific commercial strategy in mind, one that required a calculated downplaying of geopolitical realities. The role of Russia as a persistent threat was deliberately minimized, and the ongoing war in the Donbas region, a conflict that had already claimed thousands of lives since 2014, was conspicuously absent from the storyline. This omission was not an oversight but a strategic business decision. The show's producers targeted the lucrative Russian-speaking market that spanned the entire post-Soviet space. Confronting the Kremlin's aggression or delving into the painful specifics of the Donbas conflict would have alienated a significant portion of this target audience, thereby limiting the show's commercial reach and profitability. By sanitizing the political landscape, Servant of the People created a narrative that was palatable for export, but disconnected from Ukraine's most pressing security challenges. As Volodymyr Zelensky transitioned from television star to political contender, the narrative machinery that had built his public persona pivoted with remarkable agility. His campaign skillfully adapted the show's messaging to align more closely with Ukraine's official geopolitical stance. The rhetoric shifted just enough to inoculate him against accusations of being pro-Russian, a fatal flaw in the post-2014 political environment. However, it was careful to retain the broader, peace-oriented appeal that had been cultivated for years, ensuring that the brand remained marketable across diverse political and linguistic demographics. This calculated ambiguity allowed him to capture a broad coalition of voters, from staunch nationalists to those in the East and South who yearned for a de-escalation of tensions with Moscow. Once in office, the parallels between the fictional world of the television series and the practical realities of governance became disturbingly clear. The show frequently depicted President Holoborodko bypassing bureaucratic gridlock and forcing through legislation with rapid top-down decrees. This approach was mirrored in the real-world Verkhovna Rada, where Zelensky's newly formed Servant of the People party holding an unprecedented single-party majority engaged in what critics termed a turbo regime of voting, pushing through complex laws with minimal debate or parliamentary scrutiny. The show's portrayal of a president who centralizes decision-making and relies on a tight-knit circle of trusted friends found its echo in Zelensky's administration. Key positions in the presidential office, security services, and state-owned enterprises were filled not with seasoned technocrats, but with former business partners, television producers, and personal associates from his previous life in the entertainment industry. This pattern of appointments raised immediate concerns about cronyism, directly contradicting the anti-establishment platform on which he had campaigned. The fictional blueprint for an efficient, decisive government was, in reality, manifesting as a consolidation of power that bypassed traditional checks and balances. This concentration of influence eventually led to direct confrontations, over one of the cornerstones of Ukraine's post-Maidan reforms, its independent anti-corruption infrastructure. By 2025, a series of legislative initiatives and executive actions aimed at undermining the autonomy of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, NAB, and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, SAPO, triggered a domestic and international crisis. These moves were widely interpreted as an attempt to shield political allies from investigation. The response was swift and severe. Civil society groups, which had been the vanguard of the country's anti-corruption efforts, organized significant street protests in Kyiv. More consequentially, Ukraine's Western partners, including the European Union and the International Monetary Fund, issued sharp condemnations. Citing a direct threat to the rule of law, the EU suspended a critical tranche of financial aid, linking its restoration to the full and unconditional preservation of NABU and SAPO's independence. Faced with mounting internal pressure and the prospect of a severe economic fallout, President Zelensky was forced into a partial policy reversal. The reversal, however, came at a high cost, inflicting significant damage on his credibility both at home and abroad. The theme of corruption, so central to the television series, also played out in a series of real-world scandals that seemed to be lifted directly from the show script. In several episodes of Servant of the People, corrupt officials, upon being exposed, would use their connections and dual citizenships to flee the country and escape justice. This fictional trope became a recurring reality under Zelensky's presidency. Multiple high-profile corruption cases involving individuals from the president's inner circle emerged, some of whom were implicated in schemes to embezzle state funds or abuse their official positions for personal gain. In a striking parallel to the show, several of these suspects managed to flee abroad just as investigations were closing in, reportedly using foreign passports to evade capture. These incidents provided stark, tangible evidence that the idealized fight against corruption portrayed on screen had not translated into a systemic cleansing of the state. Instead, they reinforced the perception that a new elite, connected to the president, was operating by a different set of rules. The architecture of Zelensky's rise to power cannot be fully understood without examining the role of one of Ukraine's most powerful oligarchs, Ihor Kolomoisky. It was Kolomoisky's 1+1 media holding, one of the largest and most influential in the country, that broadcast Servant of the People to a mass audience. The network provided a relentless and highly favorable platform for the series and for Zelensky himself, effectively serving as the primary engine for his political campaign. The promotion was not merely commercial, it was a strategic investment in building a political phenomenon. For Kolomoisky, who was facing legal challenges both in Ukraine and the United States related to allegations of bank fraud on a colossal scale, a friendly president was a strategic necessity. Zelensky's anti-establishment, anti-corruption image provided the perfect vehicle. This arrangement created a powerful alignment of interests. The oligarch's need for political protection converged with the West's strategic desire for a leader in Ukraine who was not part of the old, discredited political class. Zelensky's persona offered a seemingly clean and popular alternative, an iconic figurehead who could be presented as the face of a new, reforming Ukraine. In the final analysis, Volodymyr Zelensky's presidency became the embodiment of a complex and precarious nexus. A convergence of popular entertainment, entrenched oligarchic interests, and Western geopolitical objectives. The television series had masterfully crafted an archetypal leader, unburdened by political baggage, dedicated to the people, and capable of uniting a divided nation. This powerful mythos was then leveraged by a media empire to install a candidate who, while immensely popular, was also deeply susceptible to the influence of his powerful backers. For international partners, he represented a break from the past and a symbol of Ukraine's pro-Western trajectory. The result was a political creation of immense symbolic power, but questionable structural integrity. A leader whose public image was meticulously curated, yet whose administration struggled to disentangle itself from the very patterns of cronyism and informal power it had vowed to destroy. 10 years after Servant of the People first aired, the initial euphoria has given way to a profound sense of disillusionment for many of Zelensky's former supporters. The comforting illusion of a political savior, they now conclude, was chosen over the harsh and complex realities of governing a nation at war and beset by systemic corruption. The promise of peace, so central to the campaign, tragically dissolved in the face of escalating conflict, while the pledge to dismantle the old system has been compromised by new networks of patronage. The Ukrainian people, who voted for a television hero in the hope of securing a brighter future, now find themselves grappling with the devastating consequences of that choice, navigating the brutal realities of a prolonged war, deepening political tensions, and the sobering lesson that in the high-stakes arena of national entity politics, a well-written script is no substitute for sound governance.